The grand spire floated above the red giant star, glowing like a dying ember in space. It was a massive diplomatic space station, neutral ground where empires met to talk instead of fight. Inside its shining halls of glass and steel, species from across the galaxy, gathered in colorful robes and strange exosuits, was a place of peace on the surface. Among them stood a human soldier. Sergeant Mason Holt, clad in full-body Terran Union combat armor, he looked like a walking tank tall, wide-shouldered and silent. His face was hidden behind a dark helmet, his voice rarely heard, and his movements calm and calculated. Many aliens found him unsettling, and one alien, in particular, found him laughable. She was Princess Celeste, 19 years old, heir to the Valerie Empire. With silver-blue skin, golden eyes, and hair like strands of glowing silk, she walked with pride and a touch of arrogance. The Valerie were one of the oldest spacefaring races, advanced in technology, art, and politics. They considered themselves the highest form of civilization to her. Humans were nothing but stubborn apes who had somehow learned to fly ships. Celeste stood at the edge of the observation deck, surrounded by her corta, few tall, elegant advisors, and a group of younger nobles who followed her like shadows. When she saw Mason Holt standing silently by the entrance, she smirked. "There's the primitive," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "They send that to protect their ambassador? A silent beast in tin armor?" The nobles chuckled. One even mimicked Mason's stiff posture, making the others laugh louder. Mason didn't move. Celeste walked closer, curious. "Do you speak human?" she asked. "Tilting her head? Or do you just grunt and shoot things?" Still, Mason said nothing. His visor remained dark. No reaction, no anger. Just quiet. Celeste leaned in closer. "I heard your kind wear those helmets because your faces frighten children." This time, Mason turned his head slightly toward her. It's not much, but enough to silence the room. The nobles stopped laughing. A small flicker of tension passed through the air. Celeste raised an eyebrow. "Did I touch a nerve?" Long pause. Then Mason spoke, his voice calm, low and steady. "No, Princess. I just find it odd." She blinked. "What do you find odd?" "That someone so proud," he said slowly, "needs to mock others to feel taller." The nobles gasped. Celeste's smile faded just for a second. "Careful, soldier. I could have you removed. Could try," Mason replied. "But I'm not here for you." That stung. No one ever spoke to her like that. She stepped back, her cheeks slightly flushed with embarrassment or maybe anger. It was hard to tell with Valerie. But instead of shouting, she laughed. "Interesting. A monkey with a spine," she said. "I didn't think your species had much left after that battle at what was it, Gaia's Breach." Mason's hands clenched, just slightly, Celeste noticed. "I read about it," she said. 5,000 humans holding a planet against a fleet. Noble, maybe, but foolish. You lost, didn't you? "No," Mason said quietly. "We held the planet." "But half your force died," she insisted. "Surely that's a loss." "We stayed," he replied. "We kept the refugees safe. Even when command told us to evacuate, even when no help came, we stayed." For the first time, Celeste paused. The words hung in the air like heavy stones. "Why?" she asked. "Because we're human," Mason said. "We protect, even when it hurts." That answer confused her. Sounded noble, but also ... inefficient. Alien Celeste tilted her head. "You really believe that makes you strong?" "I don't need to believe it," Mason said. "We've proven it." The room was silent now. Even the nobles avoided eye contact. Celeste, still trying to maintain her control, chuckled again. But this time, her voice lacked confidence. "Maybe one day you'll prove it to me, soldier." Mason's helmet tilted just slightly like a nod. "Maybe." With that, he turned and resumed his post, standing still like a statue. Celeste walked away slowly, her mind unusually quiet. That night, in her private chambers, Princess Celeste sat near the curved window, staring at the stars. Her advisors spoke softly in the background, reviewing schedules and security reports. But she wasn't listening. Instead, she was thinking about a human soldier who didn't flinch when insulted, who didn't fight when mocked, said 5,000. People died to save strangers. That kind of loyalty didn't exist in the Valerie court, not even among family, and yet the human had it. Strange, she whispered to herself. Strange creature. But deep inside, for the first time, the word primitive didn't come to mind. The next morning, the diplomatic chamber buzzed with quiet talk. The Valerie delegation had arrived early, glowing in their fine robes and floating sashes. The room smelled faintly of rare spices and humming technology. Humans, in comparison, sat straight and quiet. They wore neat black and gray uniforms, and the only one in armor was Sergeant Mason Holt. He stood like a wall near the back of the chamber, unmoving, helmet on, visor dark. Princess Selaith sat at the long curved table. She looked calm on the outside, but her eyes kept flicking toward Mason. She hadn't forgotten their exchange. No one spoke about it, but she knew the story had spread. Some found it funny, others were confused. And a few, especially the younger. Nobles had started whispering questions like, "Is it true the human faced her down? Did he threaten her? Why didn't he get punished?" She hated rumors. She hated losing control, but more than that, she hated how that soldier had stayed calm while she felt small. So today, she was going to remind everyone who she was. When the Terran ambassador spoke about a new peace agreement, Selaith didn't even pretend to listen. Instead, she waited until the attention came her way. "Ambassador," she said loudly, cutting him off mid-sentence before we move forward, "I have a personal matter to address." The room went quiet. All eyes turned to her. Even Mason tilted, his head slightly. "I would like to speak to your soldier," she said, smiling sweetly. "The one who seems to have forgotten his place." The human ambassador frowned. "Princess Selethi, this is a diplomatic. It will only take a moment," she said, still smiling. "Unless your people fear a simple conversation," that made some of the Valerie nobles chuckle. Even a few diplomats from other species looked curious. The ambassador looked at Mason. The soldier didn't move. "Sergeant Holt," the ambassador said quietly, "your call." Mason stepped forward. His heavy boots echoed on the floor. He stopped just across from the princess. She crossed her arms. "Take off your helmet." The room gasped. Even the other Valari seemed surprised. Selaith continued, bold and proud, "You stand among royalty. Show your face. Or are humans truly so ashamed of what they are?" Mason didn't speak. Then, without a word, he raised his hands and reached for his helmet. There was a hiss of pressurized air as the locks disengaged. With one smooth motion, he lifted it off. Gasps rippled across the room. He was young, maybe 25. His skin was pale from the armor. His jaw was strong, eyes sharp. There were thin scars on his cheek and neck. His short dark hair looked damp with sweat. But it wasn't the scars or the youth that surprised them. It was his eyes calm, clear, and completely unafraid. Silith's voice caught in her throat. She had expected something rough, cuggly, broken. Instead, he looked like someone who had seen too much, and still stood tall. "Is this what you wanted?" Mason asked, his voice firm but not angry. Selaith tried to smile, but it faltered. "You don't look like a soldier." "No," he said. "I look like a human." He stepped forward, not threatening, just present. Every step echoed in the silent room. "You wanted to embarrass me," he said, "to show power at you. Don't understand us. That's why you fail." Her golden eyes narrowed. "Enlighten me then. You think strength is about standing above others?" he said. "I think it's about standing with them." He pointed at the table. "Sit there because your bloodline says you should. I stand here because my people trust me. I earned this armor. I earned the right to wear it. Every dent, every scar, every part of it means I was there when others ran." Selaith looked down at the helmet in his hand. It had scorch marks, cracks, dried burn lines, battle damage. This armor kept me alive through 6 wars, he said. But I took it off today not because of your words, but because your people deserve to see who we are. He turned to the room. We are not beasts. We are not tools. We are not weak. Then he looked directly at Salav, and we don't need a crown to be respected. Double quotes, silence. No one knew what to say. Even the other species cold insectoids floating gas bags. Even the rigid Draxan warriors watched in stillness. Salath felt heat rise in her cheeks. For once, she couldn't think of a comeback, and for the first time in her life, she felt something she had never felt before. Respect for someone not of her kind, not fear. Not pity, respect. You are different, she said at last. So are you, Mason replied, putting the helmet under his arm. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. He turned and walked back to his post. The room remained silent for a few more seconds. Then the ambassador cleared his throat and resumed the peace talks. But everyone knew something had changed. Later that day, Salade stood alone in the garden dome of the station. It was filled with plants from 1,000 worlds' blue leaves, glowing stems, trees that sang in low tones. She didn't hear them. She was still thinking about Mason. Princess, said her chief advisor, approaching. Are you well? Celeste nodded slowly. Tell me, when you first saw a human, what'd you think? The advisor raised an eyebrow. Primitive, loud, too emotional, and now? She asked. The advisor paused. Less primitive, still emotional. But not weak. She gave a small smile. Yes, not weak. She looked up at the stars. Maybe it was time to learn more about these humans. Maybe strength wasn't what she thought it was. The Grand Spire never slept. Even in the artificial night, the halls of the great space station glowed with soft blue lights. Workers moved quietly. Security bots hummed past. Somewhere far off, a group of diplomats still argued over trade laws. But Princess Seleth was not with them. Instead, she stood on a balcony overlooking the Earth sector below her. Humans walked and talked soldiers. Engineers, diplomats, and even children. Some laughed. A group of teenagers chased a floating ball down the corridor, shouting in excitement. They looked free? It confused her. Why do they act like they're home? She asked aloud. They make every place feel like home, came a voice behind. Her sheet turned. It was Sergeant Mason Holt. He had removed his helmet again. His face was calm, unreadable, but his tone was lighter than before. Salath straightened. I wasn't expecting you. I was passing by, Mason said. And I saw you watching. She looked back down. I've never seen a species so loud, so emotional. You'd think they were on vacation, not guarding a peace summit. Mason leaned against the railing, arms crossed. That's how we survive. We joke, we laugh, we argue. It reminds us we're still human, even in space. Even during war. She studied him. And what do you like during peace? He smiled faintly. We don't get much of it, but when we do, we make the most of it. Salath was quiet for a while. Then she asked, why did you speak to me that day? Why not just walk away? Mason looked at her, eyes steady. Because someone needed to. No one ever dares, she said. Then maybe that's the problem. Celeste gave a small laugh. You're not like other guards. You're not like other royals, Mason said. She turned toward him. Do all humans speak so plainly? He said, but I've been shot enough times to stop caring what people think. Salath stared at him. That's a joke, right? Mason shrugged. Half joke. For a moment they stood in silence again. Then she asked, what happened at Gaia's breach? The full story. Mason took a deep breath. It was a civilian planet, he said. A colony. Farmers. Teachers. Children. We were there for training. Just 5,000 soldiers. Low supplies. Barely any ships. Then the enemy fleet jumped in. Over 50,000 troops. We had 12 hours to decide run or hold. And you stayed, Salath said quietly. We built barriers out of farming tools. used mining drones as turrets. Everyone fought. Mechanics, medics, even the mayor. We held them back for 3 days. She was quiet. You lost half your men. Mason nodded. Yeah, but we saved the people. Every last one was evacuated before the last line fell. I was the last one to leave. Silith's voice was soft now. Why risk your life for people you don't know? Mason's answer was simple. 'Cause they needed us. That's enough. Something stirred in her chest, a feeling she didn't recognize. Respect? Admiration? Confusion? Maybe all three. The next few days changed everything. Silith began walking through the human section more often. At first she told her guards it was for observation, but they knew better, and she knew they knew. Still, she didn't care. She started asking questions about their food, their music, their customs. One day she found Mason playing chess with a young engineer. She sat nearby watching silently. The next day, he offered her a seat. She accepted. Do you know how to play? He asked. No, she said. Teach me. He did, slowly, patiently. Each move explained, each strategy shared. She lost 3 games in a row. Then, on the 4th day, she won, barely. You're learning fast, Mason said with a smile. She smiled back. I have a good teacher. Later, she saw him helping a Sarnathi technician fix a broken oxygen regulator. The alien had no hands, just tendrils. Mason used his own tools, working calmly, without asking for thanks. Silith asked, Why help him? It's not your job. He answered, because he needed help. Always the same reason. Simple, honest, strong. One night, she found him looking at a holophoto, a picture of Earth. She asked, Is that your home? He nodded. Yeah, haven't been back in 5 years. Don't you miss it? Every day, he said. But this is where I'm needed. Silith sat beside him. Tell me about it. Earth, he smiled. Blue skies. Green forests. Loud cities. Quiet lakes. It's messy, but beautiful. She closed her eyes, imagining it. Sounds strange. It is, he said. But it's ours. A week passed. Then came the fire. An explosion rocked the lower cargo deck. Someone had overloaded a fusion battery. Flames and smoke filled the hall. Alarms blared. People panicked. Silith was nearby, touring the lower levels. Guards rushed to shield her, but smoke made it hard to see. A child was trapped under a fallen beam, crying. A fire robot rolled by, too slow to help, before anyone could move. Mason appeared, no helmet, just a fire-resistant coat. He ran into the smoke. Sergeant Holt, a human officer, yelled. You'll get burned. I'll be fine. Shh, he shouted. He reached the child, lifted the beam with all his strength, and pulled the kid free. Flames licked his sleeves. Alarms screamed. His skin blistered, but he didn't stop. He handed the child to the medics, then collapsed. Silith knelt beside him, eyes wide. You're hurt. I've had worse, he said, coughing. Why? She asked, almost shouting. You could have died. He looked up at her, smoke in his lungs, pain on his face, but still smiling, because they needed me. That night, Silith sat alone in her room. She couldn't stop shaking. She had seen soldiers die before, but this was different. Mason didn't fight for a cause or for glory. He fought for people. He risked his life without thinking twice. She touched her chest. Her heart was racing. Why does this human make me feel like this? She whispered. She didn't know the answer, but she knew one thing for certain. He was no primitive. He was something more, something rare. The Peace Summit was nearing its end. For 2 weeks, species from across the galaxy had discussed borders, trade, and ceasefires. Tensions rose and fell like ocean waves. But overall, the talks had gone better than expected. Everyone could feel it. An agreement was close. Princess Silith had changed too. She no longer avoided the human delegation. In fact, she visited them often. She listened when they spoke, asked questions. and even laughed at their jokes, something her guards whispered about behind her back. But Saloth didn't care. She wasn't doing it for show anymore. She was doing it because of him, Sergeant Mason Holt, the human soldier who had risked his life for a child, who had removed his helmet not to prove power, but to show honesty, who taught her how to play chess and asked nothing in return. She still didn't understand all of his people's ways, but she was starting to respect them, starting to admire him, maybe more than admire. That thought scared her. On the last night of the summit, a grand banquet was held. The spire's central dome shimmered with starlight. Music from 6 different cultures echoed through the halls. Tables overflowed with exotic food and bright-colored drinks. Saleith wore a gown of light-woven silk, glowing softly with every step. Her golden eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on Mason. He was standing near a wall, helmet off, still wearing his armor, but with the chest plate removed for comfort. He held a small glass in one hand and looked slightly out of place. She walked up to him. "You look uncomfortable," she said. He smiled faintly. "Crowds aren't really my thing. Then why come?" Wanted to make sure no one poisoned the punch, she chuckled. "For the soldier." He nodded. "And you, enjoying the party?" "A little," she said. "It's strange, though. I never used to feel nervous in a crowd." Mason looked at her. "Because you're thinking about how they see you now." She blinked. "How did you know?" "I've been there," he said. "When people expect one version of you, and you start becoming someone else." She looked down. "Do you think I've changed?" "I think you've grown," he said simply. "And growth is never easy." Their eyes met. The air between them tightened. Saloth spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "Would you walk with me?" Mason nodded. "Of course." They walked through the outer gardens of the spire. The starlight shone down through the clear ceiling above, bathing the alien plants in silver light. The paths were quiet, far from the noise of the party. Saleith stopped near a crystal fountain. "Tell me honestly," she said. "Do you think peace will last?" Mason took a deep breath. "I think it can. If people like you and me keep fighting for it." She looked at him. "You still call yourself a fighter?" "I fight for peace," he said. "Not war." She stepped closer. "And if someone threatens it, then I do what I must." There was a moment of silence. Then from the shadows, a figure moved. Fast, silent, deadly. Mason saw it first. "Get down." A flash of metal. A gleam of light. The assassin lunged forward, a thin, sharp blade aimed for Scylla's heart. Mason stepped between them without thinking. The blade plunged into his side. He grunted in pain but didn't fall. Instead, he grabbed the assassin's arm, twisted it, and slammed the attacker into the stone floor. The blade clattered away. Saleith stared in shock. Guards arrived seconds later. Tackling the assassin and calling for medical support, Mason leaned against the fountain, blood staining his side. Saleith rushed to him. "You're bleeding." He gave her a tight smile. "Yeah, I noticed." "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do that again?" His answer was simple. "Because you needed me." The medical bay was quiet. Mason lay on a table, armor removed, side bandaged. The wound was deep but not fatal. Saloth sat beside him, her expression unreadable. "The assassin was one of mine," she said softly. "A rogue noble, angry that I treated humans as equals." Mason didn't answer. He stared at the ceiling. "I'm sorry," she added. "This is my fault." "No," he said. "It's his fault. He made a choice." She leaned closer. "And you made one too. You took a blade for me again." He met her eyes. "That's what I do, I know," she whispered. "But it's not just duty, is it?" He didn't answer. She reached out and took his hand. Skin was rough, calloused, warm. "Mason," she said, voice trembling slightly. "You've changed me. I don't know how or why, but you did." He squeezed her hand gently. "You changed me too." They sat like that, hand in hand in the silence. Not royal and soldier, just two people who had found something rare in the stars. The next day, the peace agreement was signed. It was the first time in over 100 years that the major species of the quadrant agreed on common terms. The Valerie Emperor himself sent a message of thanks. He even approved Silith's request for a human ambassador on their homeworld. Something that had never happened before, but none of that mattered as much too. Silith is one thing. Mason was alive, and he was staying, not as her guard, but as her friend. Maybe something more. The Grand Spire was quiet. The Peace Summit had ended 2 weeks ago. Delegates had returned to their homeworlds. The banners were taken down, the speeches archived. The corridors no longer echoed with alien voices. Only a few guests remained. One of them was Sergeant Mason Holt. His injuries had healed. Mostly, he still moved carefully, his side wrapped in smart bandages under his shirt. The stab wound would leave a scar, but it wouldn't slow him down. He stood by the same crystal fountain where he had taken the blade meant for Princess Silith. He didn't know why he came here. Every day maybe to remind himself he'd lived. Maybe. To remind himself someone had cared. The memory of her face shocked, afraid. Holding his hand as he bled was burned into his mind. He had faced war, fire, and death before, but nothing had ever made his heart beat like the way she looked at him that night. Syla. The daughter of the Valerie Crown stood in her private chamber. Staring at her reflection, she was no longer the same girl who had first met. Mason, that girl had been proud, arrogant, cold. Now she felt awake. She had seen bravery, laughter, pain, honor, all of it from a species she once believed to be below her. And from one man who changed everything. She touched the edge of her robe and turned away from the mirror. She had made her decision. She found him at the fountain. He turned as she approached. She wore simple robes, no crown, no glowing dress, no guards behind her, just Silith. Mason straightened. Princess, she raised a hand. No titles today. He smiled. All right then. Silith. Her eyes lit up. You said it right. This time, I practiced, he said. She stepped closer. You're healing. Mostly still sore when I laugh. Then I'll avoid jokes, she said. He chuckled, then winced slightly. They stood quietly for a moment. Then she said, I spoke to my father. Mason raised an eyebrow. I imagine that went well. He shouted for 13 minutes, she said, then asked if you were strong enough to marry me. Mason froze. Wait, what? She laughed. I'm joking. Please don't, he said. My heart's still recovering. Her face grew serious again. But I did speak to him. I told him I want to spend more time with humans. Learn from them. Work. With them. And what did he say? He said I could do whatever I wanted. As long as I stop embarrassing the throne, Mason chuckled. Is that possible? Not with you around, she said. Their eyes met again. No walls. No politics. Just two people. I'm not sure what this is between us, Silith said softly. But I know I don't want it to end. Mason nodded slowly. They stood silently, stars shining above. Weeks passed. Silith joined the diplomatic envoy sent to Earth. For the first time in history, Valerie Royal walked on human soil. Cities stopped. Media exploded. Children waved from windows. She didn't wear a crown. She didn't make speeches. She listened. She walked the parks, ate street food, watched old Earth movies with Mason in a tiny theater on a hill. They laughed during the bad ones, held hands during the good ones. She asked, why do humans cry so easily? Mason said, because it means we care. One night she sat on a wooden dock, feet touching the water of a lake under the moonlight. Mason joined her. It's beautiful. She whispered. Yeah, he said. But you still stare at the stars more than the water. She smiled. They're part of me. But now, Earth feels part of me too. He looked at her. Do you miss your world? Sometimes, she said. But when I'm with you, I don't feel lost. He gently reached out and took her hand. She didn't pull away. 6 months later, war threatened again. Not between the Valarian humans, but from a third force. The Green Thay, a nomadic race known for destruction, attacked border colonies. Once, again, lives were at risk. This time, the humans and Valari stood together. Silith, now a junior ambassador, helped plan evacuations and defenses. She wasn't just a royal Shay, was part of the effort. Mason returned to active duty, this time with upgraded armor and a Valerie-made energy shield on his wrist, gift from her, before he left on his mission. She met him in the hangar. "You could die," she whispered. He gave a soft smile, "and I'll try harder not to." She leaned forward and kissed his cheek. "For peace," she said. "For peace," he replied. The Krenth threat was stopped. Not with a great war, but with strategy, coordination, and unity. Human soldiers fought beside Valar guardians. Old enemies became allies. New friendships formed, and Mason returned home alive. A year later, a new monument was built on Gaia's Breach, the site of Mason's old battle. Not a statue of a hero, but a sculpture of a Valar and a human standing side by side. Looking up at the stars, Saloth gave the first speech. She didn't talk about bloodlines or politics. She talked about what one soldier taught her. About what? It means to protect, to care, to grow. She ended with a line that was broadcast across 1,000 systems. "In the darkest places of space, I found the brightest part of myself." He wore simple armor, spoke plain words, and gave more than anyone. Ever asked, "That is what humanity is?" That is what we should all become. The crowd stood in silence, then applause erupted. Mason, standing in the back, lowered his head. Tears filled his eyes. He had never wanted fame, but he couldn't stop the feeling in his chest. Pride, and maybe something deeper. Later that night, the stars above Gaia's Breach shimmered brighter than usual. Two figures stood together on a hill. One wore armor, scarred but shining. The other wore a simple robe, with golden eyes that held entire galaxies. They didn't speak for a while then. Saloth said, "So, still think I'm just a spoiled alien princess?" Mason smiled. "No. Now I think you're the bravest person I've ever met." She looked at him. "Do you think the universe is ready for what we are?" He shrugged. "Let them be shocked." She stepped closer. "Good," she said, "because I'm not letting go." And under the stars, the human soldier and the alien princess held each other. 2 lives, 2 worlds, 1 future. Together.